London, the Dorchester Hotel's grand ballroom. Sheikh Khalid Al-Mansouri, worth $12 billion and one of the most powerful men in the Middle East, stands isolated among 300 elite guests who treat him like an exotic curiosity rather than the business titan he is. For 2 hours, he's endured condescending smiles, broken English, and cultural ignorance from people desperate for his money but unwilling to show him basic respect. Just as he's about to leave and cancel the $2 billion investment deal that would transform London's skyline, a young Lebanese maid named Layla approaches with a tea service. In perfect Arabic, she whispers the words that will change everything. "Your Excellency, would you honor me by accepting some authentic mint tea from home?" Those simple words don't just offer comfort. They spark a chain of events that will elevate a humble maid to international prominence and teach an entire room of elites that respect transcends language, status, and billions. Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed Al-Mansouri adjusted his gold-trimmed bisht for the 100th time that evening, the traditional Arabic robe feeling like armor against the piercing stares and whispered conversations that followed him through the Dorchester's opulent ballroom. At 45, he commanded business empires across 3 continents, owned more real estate than some small countries, and could buy and sell most of the people in this room without checking his bank balance. Yet tonight, surrounded by London's financial elite, he felt like a museum exhibit behind invisible glass. The International Investment Summit had drawn Britain's most influential power brokers, all gathered to court foreign capital like courtiers seeking royal favor. Khalid's presence was the evening's crown jewel. His Al-Mansouri Group had expressed interest in a $2 billion mixed-use development that would reshape London's financial district. It was the kind of transformative project that could define a generation, create thousands of jobs, and cement London's position as a global financial hub. But as Khalid moved through the crowd beneath crystal chandeliers casting golden light on mahogany-paneled walls, he encountered a frustrating pattern that made his diplomatic training struggle against rising indignation. Every interaction felt like a carefully choreographed dance of condescension disguised as courtesy. Lord Pemberton, a portly man whose red face suggested intimate familiarity with the evening's champagne, had gushed about how marvelous it was that Khalid could grace them with his presence, then immediately questioned whether he actually understood the complex financial instruments they'd be discussing. The assumption was clear. Wealthy Arabs were primitives who had stumbled upon oil money. Margaret Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Financial, had spoken to him slowly and loudly as if he were deaf rather than foreign, offering translators for contracts despite his Cambridge education and decades of conducting international business in flawless English. Her surprise at his linguistic competence was both insulting and revealing. Charles Morrison, head of Morrison Development, had presented him to investors like a prized acquisition rather than a sophisticated partner, using words like blessing and resources that reduced him to a medieval potentate dispensing favors rather than a modern businessman evaluating opportunities. Each conversation followed the same pattern: desperate desire for his money coupled with systematic attempts to diminish his humanity. They wanted his billions, but couldn't see past their own prejudices to recognize the mind that had created those billions. It was a masterclass in how cultural ignorance could masquerade as courtesy, how privilege could blind people to their own limitations. The final insult came during Morrison's formal presentation to the assembled crowd. Standing before 300 of London's most powerful people, Morrison described Khalid as representing exotic opportunities when East meets West in international finance. The word exotic hung in the air like a slap, reducing a man who had revolutionized 3 industries and built schools and hospitals across 4 continents to a curiosity from the mysterious Orient. Khalid checked his Patek Philippe, a gift from the Swiss CEO whose company he'd saved from bankruptcy. In 30 minutes, his driver would arrive. In the morning, his lawyers would draft a polite but firm withdrawal from the London project. These people would never understand that they'd lost not just $2 billion, but the chance to work with someone who could have transformed their city. He began moving toward the exit, his security details subtly shifting to escort him out. The evening had been a master class in how prejudice could cost billions, how small minds could sabotage enormous opportunities. He was 3 steps from the ballroom doors when everything changed. Behind him, a soft voice spoke in the most beautiful Arabic he'd heard all evening. The words were simple, respectful, touched with the warm accent of Lebanon. "Your Excellency, forgive my presumption. Would you honor me by accepting some authentic mint tea? I noticed you haven't touched the refreshments." Khalid turned to see a young woman in the hotel's staff uniform. Crisp white shirt, gray vest, dark hair pulled back professionally. She held a silver tea service with reverence usually reserved for sacred objects. But it wasn't the tea that stopped him in his tracks. It was hearing someone, finally, speak to him as if he were human rather than a walking bank account. For the first time all evening, someone had seen the man before the money. Layla Qasim had been watching the evening's events unfold from the service corridors that honeycomb the Dorchester like hidden arteries. As a senior member of the hotel's hospitality team, she'd served at countless high-profile events, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she was witnessing something that made her Lebanese heart ache with recognition. A systematic humiliation disguised as courtesy. Born in Beirut to a family that had lost everything in the Civil War, Layla understood what it meant to be judged by appearances, to have your worth measured by others' limited understanding of your world. She'd arrived in London at 16, with nothing but her grandmother's recipes and a fierce determination to build a life worthy of the sacrifices that had sent her to safety. 7 years later, she'd worked her way from kitchen assistant to senior hospitality coordinator at one of London's most prestigious hotels. She spoke 4 languages fluently, held a certificate in international hospitality management, and was completing her degree at the London School of Economics while working full-time, a testament to her grandmother's teaching that knowledge was the only inheritance that could never be stolen. Throughout the evening, Layla had watched Sheikh Al-Mansouri being systematically othered by people who should have been honored by his presence. She'd seen Lord Pemberton's patronizing explanations of financial concepts to a man who probably understood them better than his teacher. She'd witnessed Margaret Whitmore's loud, slow English, directed at someone who'd been educated at Cambridge. She'd heard the condescending assumptions, the cultural ignorance, the casual racism dressed up as professional courtesy. The moment that crystallized her decision came during Morrison's presentation. When he described the Sheikh as an exotic opportunity, Layla watched something die in the man's eyes. The same look she'd seen in her father's face when British immigration officials spoke to him like he was stupid. The same expression she'd worn after particularly difficult days when accents were mocked and origins questioned. It was the look of someone remembering they didn't belong, despite all evidence to the contrary. Layla had slipped away from her station to prepare authentic Lebanese mint tea using the hotel's premium reserve, the special stock kept for Middle Eastern guests who understood the difference between tea made with love and tea made with indifference. She selected the finest silver service, added the small touches that transformed a beverage into a gesture of respect, a few drops of rose water, fresh mint, the proper small glass instead of a Western teacup. As she approached Sheikh Al-Mansouri near the ballroom's exit, her heart hammered against her ribs. She was about to break every protocol the Dorchester had established. But watching this accomplished man being diminished by small minds and smaller imaginations, she realized that some rules were less important than human dignity. When she spoke to him in Arabic, offering tea prepared as her grandmother had taught her, she watched surprise replace resignation in his dark eyes. His response, in refined classical Arabic touched with regional warmth, revealed education, sophistication, and profound relief at finally hearing his native tongue spoken with respect rather than exoticism. The sheikh accepted the tea with both hands in the traditional gesture of gratitude, and as he sipped, Layla saw his eyes close briefly in what might have been pleasure or profound homecoming. Around them, the ballroom continued its elegant dance of commerce and culture, but in their small pocket of Arabic conversation, something extraordinary was happening. A connection was forming between two people who understood what it meant to be foreign in familiar places, successful in societies that saw them as perpetually other. Neither of them realized that this simple gesture, a maid offering perfectly prepared tea to a misunderstood millionaire, was about to transform both their lives in ways that would echo far beyond the Dorchester's gilded walls. The sheikh found himself asking about her background, learning that she was Lebanese, that her family had come during difficult times, that Lebanon never truly left the heart. As they spoke in Arabic, maintaining privacy while the curious ballroom watched, he began to understand that this remarkable young woman possessed insights that had escaped every supposed expert in the room. When she observed that many powerful men from their region encountered exactly what he'd experienced, assumptions of incompetence disguised as courtesy, the sheikh realized he'd found someone who understood not just his language, but his world. The conversation that followed would change everything. As Sheikh Al-Mansouri and Layla continued their Arabic conversation, the ballroom's elite found themselves excluded from the most important discussion of their own event. The irony was perfect. For 2 hours, Khalid had been marginalized. Now his native tongue created a wall of privacy that left his would-be partners scrambling. Through their conversation, Khalid discovered that Layla was pursuing international business studies at LSE while working full-time. Her insights into cross-cultural negotiations, developed through years of observing international guests navigate British business culture, surpassed anything he'd heard from the evening's supposed experts. Layla's analysis was surgically precise. These people desperately wanted his money but were terrified of his otherness. Instead of adapting to shifted global power, they were diminishing him to preserve their own superiority. When Charles Morrison approached with obvious discomfort at seeing his star investor engaged in foreign conversation with hotel staff, the sheikh made his decisive move. He announced that Layla would join their discussions as cultural liaison. Morrison's horrified confusion revealed exactly the prejudice that had plagued the evening. What followed transformed the ballroom entirely. When Lord Pemberton attempted more condescending explanations, Layla quietly mentioned that His Excellency had pioneered sovereign wealth fund strategies and owned over $1.2 billion in London properties, including Pemberton's own building. Each attempt to patronize the sheikh was met with revelations about his actual expertise: Singapore developments, Morocco energy projects.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Technology innovations across continents. But more remarkably, Layla demonstrated her own extraordinary capabilities, analyzing Morrison's development plans and revealing critical flaws that could cost millions. Her insights into London's changing demographics, the need for culturally appropriate amenities, and international residence requirements exposed the limitations of planning that assumed a homogeneous British market. The silence that followed was profound. The room's entire hierarchy had been revolutionized, and everyone understood they were witnessing something unprecedented that would reshape how East and West conducted business together. The shift in the ballroom's atmosphere was seismic. Word spread through London's financial community with viral intensity as executives realized they were witnessing something historically significant. Sheikh Al-Mansouri, now commanding the room's attention with Layla at his side, had transformed from isolated outsider to undisputed center of gravity. But rather than savoring his reversal of fortune, He was studying Layla with the focused intensity of someone recognizing raw genius. The evening's remaining presentations became a masterclass in international business sophistication. Every cultural misstep was gently corrected, every assumption challenged with facts that left supposed experts scrambling to understand how they'd misread the situation so completely. When Morrison presented his development plans in detail, inadequacies became glaring under Layla's analytical examination. Her questions revealed planning gaps no one else had identified, cultural considerations that would determine success or failure in London's increasingly international market. The retail spaces assumed Western consumer patterns in a dramatically shifted demographic landscape. The residential units were designed for traditional British families rather than international buyers. The commercial areas failed to account for global businesses operating across time zones and cultures. Each observation demonstrated not just Layla's analytical capabilities, but the fundamental limitation of planning that refused to acknowledge London's transformation from homogeneous British city to global metropolitan centre. As the evening progressed, something unprecedented occurred. Traditional power brokers found themselves learning from someone they'd initially dismissed as invisible. Lord Pemberton began asking genuine questions about cultural sensitivity. Margaret Whitmore inquired about cross-cultural training programs. The reversal was complete when Morrison, desperate to salvage his relationship with the Sheikh, began incorporating Layla's recommendations. Her suggestions weren't just culturally sensitive, they were financially brilliant, potentially increasing occupancy and yields beyond original projections. The contracts negotiated over the following hours would become templates for international business development across London's financial district, representing recognition that success required more than capital. It demanded cultural intelligence that traditional British business education had failed to provide. As dawn approached over London's financial district, Sheikh Al-Mansouri made the announcement that would change several lives simultaneously. His $2 billion investment would proceed, but with conditions reflecting everything the evening had revealed about London's need for cultural sophistication. The development would incorporate Layla's insights about international requirements. But more significantly, she would serve as cultural integration consultant, reporting directly to the Sheikh with senior executive compensation, $200,000 annually, plus equity participation. The silence was profound. Layla looked struck by benevolent lightning. Morrison frantically recalculated employing someone whose insights had proven more valuable than his entire team's expertise. But the Sheikh continued. Layla would complete her LSE degree on an accelerated schedule with all expenses covered. Furthermore, Morrison's firm would establish an international cultural consulting division with Layla as director. London's future depended on understanding its true demographics. The transformation was breathtaking. In one evening, a Lebanese maid had become a senior executive with responsibility for revolutionizing international business. Layla's response demonstrated the grace that had made everything possible. Rather than immediately accepting, she questioned whether someone without completed formal credentials should be entrusted with such responsibility. Her humility only reinforced the Sheikh's conviction. The negotiations that followed were London's fastest in real estate history, fueled by recognition that everyone had nearly missed a lifetime opportunity. Cultural intelligence wasn't just valuable, it was essential for success in a global economy. As contracts were drafted, broader implications became clear. This wasn't about one project. It was London's financial district acknowledging that traditional approaches to international business were inadequate for modern realities. The ripple effects spread through London's business community with unprecedented speed. Other firms began recognizing their cultural blind spots, their missed opportunities with international partners who'd been patronized rather than respected. The evening had demonstrated something profound about human potential. Talent wasn't confined to traditional hierarchies. Sometimes the most valuable insights came from those systematically overlooked by conventional power structures. As the sun rose over London, participants understood they'd witnessed something historically significant. A maid's gesture of offering tea had evolved into complete transformation of international business culture. 6 months later, the transformation was complete in ways no one could have predicted that extraordinary evening at the Dorchester. Layla Qasim stood in her corner office on the 40th floor of London's iconic Gherkin, reviewing reports from 3 continents while managing operations that spanned cultures, languages, and business practices that would have been incomprehensible to traditional British finance just months earlier. The view from her floor-to-ceiling windows encompassed the entire city of London, from the Thames to Tower Bridge, a daily reminder of how dramatically life could change when talent met opportunity unburdened by prejudice. Her office walls displayed certificates in 4 languages, photographs with government ministers from 6 countries, and the framed front page of the Financial Times, announcing the largest cultural consulting contract in European history. The International Cultural Consulting Division of Morrison Development had evolved far beyond its original scope. What had started as Sheikh Al-Mansouri's requirement for his investment had become London's most sought-after advisory service, revolutionizing how global business was conducted. Layla's first major success had come within weeks, resolving a $500 million Chinese investment that had been on the verge of collapse due to cultural misunderstandings that traditional British negotiators couldn't navigate. Word had spread through international business communities with viral intensity. Russian oligarchs sought her guidance on British social customs. Japanese corporations requested her insight into regulatory frameworks. American firms needed her expertise to approach Middle Eastern partnerships with appropriate cultural intelligence. Her LSE degree, completed magna cum laude in record time with Sheikh Al-Mansouri's support, had been almost anticlimactic. By graduation, she was already being cited in academic papers as a pioneer in cross-cultural business integration, invited to lecture at Harvard Business School, and consulted by government trade ministries across 3 continents. Sheikh Al-Mansouri's London project, now known as Harmony Square, had exceeded every projection imaginable. The mixed-use development achieved 98% occupancy before construction was complete, becoming a model for culturally responsive urban development that attracted international businesses and residents who'd previously avoided London due to cultural barriers. But the project's success had generated opportunities neither Layla nor the Sheikh had anticipated. Governments from Asia, Africa, and the Americas requested their consultation on international business districts. The World Bank commissioned them to develop cultural integration protocols for development projects spanning dozens of countries. The United Nations offered Layla a position as special advisor on cross-cultural economic development. The transformation within London's traditional business establishment was equally remarkable. Lord Pemberton had become one of their strongest advocates, frequently citing the evening at the Dorchester as his personal revelation about cultural prejudice. His firm now required all partners to complete cultural sensitivity training before engaging with international clients. Margaret Whitmore had hired Layla's consultancy to restructure her entire company's approach to global markets, acknowledging that decades of international business failures could be traced to exactly the kind of cultural blind spots Layla had identified. Her firm's international revenues had tripled within 6 months of implementing culturally intelligent business practices. Even Charles Morrison had undergone profound transformation. The success of Harmony Square had established his company as London's premier developer of international commercial spaces, but he credited Layla with teaching him that cultural competence wasn't optional in modern business. It was fundamental to survival in a global economy. The ripple effects extended throughout London's financial district. Business schools added mandatory courses in cultural intelligence. The Lord Mayor's office established a Cultural Business Integration Council with Layla as its founding chair. International recruitment focused not just on technical skills or capital, but on cultural insights that could unlock previously inaccessible markets. On this particular morning, As Layla prepared for a video conference connecting Dubai, Singapore, São Paulo, and Lagos, a routine that would have been impossible without the cultural protocols she'd developed, she reflected on the journey from serving tea to transforming international commerce. Her phone displayed a message from Sheikh Al-Mansouri, currently in Riyadh for meetings with the Saudi Investment Ministry, saw the UN announcement. "Your grandmother's wisdom continues changing the world." Layla smiled, remembering the woman who'd taught her to prepare perfect mint tea and insisted that kindness was never wasted, even when unnoticed. Her grandmother had been correct about many things, but perhaps most importantly, about the power of seeing people as they truly were, rather than as prejudice suggested they should be. The intercom announced her next appointment, a delegation from Nigeria's Ministry of Economic Development seeking guidance on attracting European investment while maintaining cultural authenticity. As they entered, Layla noticed the subtle signs of nervousness that often accompanied first meetings with European business advisors who might not understand their perspective. She greeted them in fluent Yoruba, immediately putting them at ease while demonstrating the cultural intelligence that had made her indispensable to London's international business community. "Welcome to London. I hope your journey was comfortable. Shall we begin with proper Nigerian tea? I have authentic blends that I believe you'll find prepared with appropriate respect." Tea. Their surprised pleasure at being welcomed in their own language, with understanding of their customs, reminded Layla why her work mattered. In a world increasingly divided by misunderstanding and prejudice, she'd discovered her calling in building bridges of comprehension between cultures that traditional business had kept artificially separated. Outside her window, London stretched toward the horizon, a city transformed by recognition that its greatest strength lay not in historical privilege or financial tradition, but in its ability to embrace wisdom from every corner of the globe. The maid who'd offered tea to a misunderstood millionaire had become the woman who taught the world that respect was the most valuable currency in international business. As the meeting progressed, and Layla watched understanding bloom between cultures that had seemed impossibly divided, she knew her grandmother's lessons about kindness had been vindicated in ways the old woman could never have imagined. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the largest transformations. Sometimes offering tea to a stranger changes the world. If this story has moved you, leave a like, share in the comments. Have you ever witnessed how cultural misunderstanding affected business or personal relationships? Do you believe that genuine respect can transcend any barrier? Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss other stories proving that cultural bridge building can transform entire industries and change lives. Remember, Layla's simple gesture of offering tea in Arabic didn't just comfort a homesick billionaire. It launched a revolution in international business that changed how cultures connect. Your next act of genuine cultural respect might change someone's world forever.